name's Joe, and in honor of Defenders hitting Netflix today, I thought it would be fun to do a video review of my collection of Marvel Legends, Defenders, Street Level Heroes, Daredevil, and Punisher action figures. So let's get on with the review. Cheers. Alright, here's the Toy Biz Marvel Legends Face-Off Daredevil. This figure came in a 2-pack with a Kingpin figure, and there was a variant to this figure with an unmasked Matt Murdock head. The articulation and the sculpting is very well done. The sculpting kind of makes it look like the suit is shrink-wrapped to his body, which isn't very realistic, I understand, but I think it looks really cool. Even has like seam lines in the costume and different things like that. I think that's really, really nice. I like the head sculpt a lot too. A lot of Toy Biz figures have kind of odd and sometimes useless articulation, and I think this is a pretty good example. He has this really strange joint here that kind of looks like a piece of macaroni. So it doesn't really add a lot of mobility to him either, because you can still get his arms all the way up like that. You know, it just doesn't... I don't know what the point of that is, really. And it makes his shoulders look kind of bulbous, which, again, is a problem with a lot of Toy Biz figures. But aside from that, I think his articulation's really, really well done. He has these really nice ankle rockers, for instance, that I really, really like a lot. I wish more figures had ankle rockers that were this effective. And this Daredevil figure comes with a pair of nunchucks for an accessory, and they're done fairly well. They can actually be stored in his holster there on his hip, which is really cool. But they're painted in this really terrible, like chalky white paint, which scratches really, really easily. So be careful for that. I understand he's probably not everybody's cup of tea, but I think he's a really fun figure. You can get him in a lot of really dynamic poses, and I appreciate the level of detail and sculpting that went into him. And here's the Toy Biz Marvel Legends Face-Off Kingpin figure from the 2-pack. There was a variant to this figure that came in an all-black suit, and he also has a different head sculpt with a more angry face with gritted teeth. I like this one better, and I've seen Kingpin in the comics in a suit more like this than in an all-black suit, I think, more often, so I prefer this version. I think this one is definitely the best. Now, this figure does have some problems, especially the paint around his wrist there. You can see there's some flesh tone paint on his sleeve, and his articulation's not that great. I've never really been able to get his hips to move at all, which is no big deal because Kingpin's not necessarily a real dynamic character. You don't have to put him in a bunch of crazy poses, but one thing that bugs the crap out of me is that he just has hinge wrists there. There's no swivel there, which makes it kind of problematic when you're trying to pose him with the cane. And this cane, I've dipped it in hot water. I've tried to heat it up with a hairdryer. I've never been able to get it straightened out. It always goes right back to this like weird curvy position. And his hands, because they're articulated, they don't hold it very well. The paint on Kingpin's cane is just like the paint on Daredevil's nunchucks. It's this really flat, chalky black paint, and it scuffs really easily. Aside from those issues, though, I'm happy to have this figure. I found this 2-pack at a local convention several years ago, and I ended up haggling with the vendor until he gave it to me for $30. And here's the Face-Off Daredevil and Kingpin side by side, and if you get a chance to track this set down for a decent price, and I'd say go for it. I'm really happy with it. I like it a lot. Alright, here's the Toy Biz Marvel Legends Punisher figure. This is one of my first Toy Biz figures in my collection, and he came with this display diorama piece. Looks like a fire escape with some guns and shit on the ground. I think that's really, really cool. I'm pretty sure he didn't come with that shotgun, though. I use most of my Punisher weapons like interchangeably between my different Punisher figures. Sometimes I give them to other figures in my collection that either don't have weapons or have really crappy weapons. This is an older Punisher figure, so his articulation is a little outdated in some spots, but he's still more articulated than a lot of current figures that you find on the market. Looking at you, Mattel. He's got a hinge at the hands here that make it kind of hard for him to hold weapons sometimes. He doesn't have an ab joint or an ab crunch joint or diaphragm or anything. And he's got these kind of wonky hip joints that are kind of similar to the DC Universe hip joints. But he's got really, really nice ankle rockers that work really well. I really like that a lot. I really appreciate that on my old Toy Biz figures, the ankle rockers that give you a lot of range of motion there. And he's got toe pivot. I'm not going to go through all of the articulation, just the high points. I really like this Punisher figure a lot, and I think he still holds up pretty well among more modern Marvel Legends figures. This is the Toy Biz Marvel Legends Elektra figure. This is another figure that came with a diorama display stand piece rather than a Build-A-Figure part, and I don't have that to show you. I've got it packed away somewhere if I still have it at all. I think this Elektra figure is a prime example of a figure that needs to be redone in the more modern Hasbro Marvel Legends line. In fact, when we first found out that Elektra was going to be part of the Marvel Knights Netflix wave or Man-Thing wave, I was really, really hoping for a comic book style Elektra over the Netflix TV version. So this Elektra figure is kind of a mess. She's got a really functional neck joint. She can look up pretty far. She can look down really far, side to side, but it just looks terrible. She's got those same macaroni joints that Face Off Daredevil had. She's got two bicep swivel joints. She's got one here, where it's pretty obvious, and she's got another one here. It's really strange. I don't know why they doubled up on that. It's pretty redundant. She's got articulated fingers that make it kind of hard for her to hold her accessories sometimes. Ab crunch works pretty well. She's got a waist swivel. Her hips are really, really terrible. She's got this like cut joint, the swivel that's at an angle there, so her hips only go out like this, and then they go out to the side, kind of like that Punisher I just showed you. But it just looks terrible here. The thigh swivel is hid very well by these bands on her thighs. I think that's really cool. And she's got really nice ankle articulation, though. Just like most of my Toy Biz Marvel Legends figures. I really like that a lot. But I think this is a prime candidate for a redo from Hasbro. This Elektra figure also comes with a sword sheath that plugs into a small hole in the middle of her back, and she comes with a pair of swords that they're okay. They're a little dainty. You know, they're all right, better than nothing, I guess. And it also has a little spot to plug her size in. So you know, that's cool. It's functional. It's a good place to store your weapons, but I've never seen her use anything like this in the comics, so I don't display her with this. All right, here's the Toy Biz Marvel Legends Luke Cage figure from the Mojo Build-A-Figure wave. I picked this figure up at a local comic book shop a few years ago, and I'm really happy with him. His articulation's really great, and the paint detail on him is pretty good for a Toy Biz figure. My only real complaints with this figure are that the pins that they used for his wrists are cast in yellow plastic, and they were just painted match his skin tone, and then that paint immediately came off when I used the joints. Also, on his left hand here, they have articulated fingers, and that just looks really awful. Like, I would have rather had another fist than this weird joint here. And again, you can see that yellow pin right there that they use for his fingers. But this is like basically not good for anything unless you want him to point or flip the bird or just use a karate chop hand. That's typically what I do. Now I imagine most people think this costume is pretty ridiculous, but I think it's really fun and silly, and I really like this figure a lot. I think that the little problems with his hands, you could probably swap his hands out and match the paint if you wanted to. I might try to do that eventually sometime. So this is a really kick-ass figure. I highly recommend him. So this is the only Luke Cage figure that I have. I don't have a modern version of him, unfortunately. The Thunderbolts set version of Luke Cage, the more modern version that came in the, I think it was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive set, Thunderbolts figures. That was going for buku bucks on eBay, I guess. And then now Hasbro is reissuing that figure. Essentially, it's slightly different, but it's basically the same figure in a Defenders set that comes with a Iron Fist, a Daredevil figure, and Jewel. So if you're looking for a more modern Luke Cage, then I suggest you check that out. So I was kind of late to the party with Marvel Legends. All the Toy Biz Marvel Legends figures that I bought either on eBay or at conventions and things like that. This is one of the first Marvel Legends figures that I ever owned. This is early on in the days of Hasbro Marvel Legends, and you can tell that he's got a few problems. His feet and his hands are way too big. His head's way too small. So this Daredevil figure comes with a set of nunchucks again, and they fit into this little holster on the side of his hip. They fit in there pretty well. I really like the head sculpt on this, but like I said, the head is just way too small. It's out of proportion for the rest of his body. And then, you know, other parts of his body, like his thighs, are a little bit too big, I think, and especially his feet. And his ankle articulation really sucks. It just goes back and forth like this and has a little pivot from side to side. There's no ankle rocker joint there at all. I still like this figure. I think he looks nice until you pose him next to other Marvel Legends figures, and then he looks really, really petite. This is a Hasbro Marvel Legends Punisher from the Epic Heroes wave. The Epic Heroes figures, they didn't come with Build-A-Figure parts. Instead, they came with figure stands. And I never saw any of these figures at retail stores. I was able to order them at my local comic book shop at the time. This Punisher figure is using the same body as the movie Nick Fury and the Mandroid wave, Red Skull, so can't really put his arms down to his side very well. That's about as far down as they go. You can't really get him into a pose where he can hold the rifle with two hands, which kind of sucks. And then his hip joints are that weird Y joint where you have to rotate the thigh around. It's a real pain in the ass, so it's kind of a shame. This jacket looks nice, but really hinders the arm articulation too, so that's kind of a shame. So I really like the paint detail on his gloves here, the knuckles there. I think that's really, really nice. It looks pretty good. I think that the stubble on his face is pretty well done, and I really like the wash effect on his belt and his holster here and on his boots. I think that looks really, really sharp. Unfortunately, mine has a little paint blemish here, but I could use some goof off to get that off. Next up is the Hasbro Marvel Legends Daredevil from the Hobgoblin wave. And this figure is pretty much my go-to Daredevil now, because he fits in better with the rest of my Marvel Legends collection than the face-off Daredevil does. So I'm really happy with this figure, but my only real complaint is that his batons are really gummy. Like, they're really bendy, and it's hard to make them look straight. But they plug in to each other like this, so you can have a staff instead of just a baton, and when you take them apart like this, you can plug them into the holster on his hip there. This Daredevil figure was one of the harder ones to find from the Hobgoblin Build-A-Figure wave, and if you missed out on him, then you're in luck, because there's a, I think an Amazon exclusive 4-pack coming out soon that has a reissue of this Daredevil figure. But the colors are different, I think. I think that the costume is bright red, and the boots and gloves are darker red. Alright, here's my custom Marvel Legends Bullseye figure. I made this a month or so before Hasbro announced that they were going to do an official comic book style Bullseye figure for the Marvel Knights Man-Thing wave. And I've seen that figure in person like 3 or 4 times. I like my custom much better. There's a couple of things that figure has that my custom doesn't. Butterfly joints, obviously, I would prefer that, I think, for a character like Bullseye especially. That dagger throwing effect hand would be really, really cool. The unmasked head, I couldn't care less about that because it reminds me of Colin Farrell from that Daredevil movie, and I absolutely hated his version of Bullseye. So, anyways, I'm really happy with this custom still. Even having seen the official version that Hasbro did recently. And if you're interested in finding out more about this custom figure, then I'll put a link in the description below so you can see a video review I did of this figure. Alright, here's the Walgreens exclusive Marvel Legends Daredevil figure in his original costume. And this costume is supposed to be like an homage to Matt Murdock's father battling Jack Murdock. Was a boxer, and his trunks and his robe that he wore when he was boxing, I guess, were this yellow and maroon color like this, and this costume is supposed to be like a tribute to his father, kind of. And I can understand where a lot of people wouldn't really care for this costume too much, and truthfully, it's not my favorite costume, but I think it's an essential part of Daredevil history, and I really like this figure a lot because of that. This Daredevil figure also came with an alternate head sculpt. It's supposed to be an unmasked Matt Murdock head. It's basically just a repaint of a modern Hawkeye head sculpt that on a figure that came out a few years back. I don't really care for it too much. It's a pain in the ass to get off and on that figure, and it's not painted particularly well, so I don't ever use this. But you know, here's a little tip for you. If you've got that Jim Lee Marvel Legends Cyclops figure that came out earlier this year, you could paint the hair on this brown and slap it on there, because they're both using the Bucky Cap mold, so this would fit on it. And while we're on the topic of Walgreens exclusives, here's the Walgreens exclusive Punisher figure from Marvel Legends. And I think a lot of people kind of refer to this one as the Jim Lee Punisher because of this head sculpt with the bandana. This is very similar to how the character looked in Punisher War Journal, which was illustrated by Jim Lee. So this Walgreens exclusive Punisher figure also comes with the bazooka, which was reused for a Deadpool figure recently. He comes with this really silly white, I think it's a shotgun, with a magazine on it. And he also comes with this alternative head that I don't care for as much as the one with the bandana, but I think in general most people prefer this head sculpt over the one that's on the figure now. It doesn't look bad. There's nothing bad about it. I still would have bought the figure even if it hadn't come with a bandana head sculpt, but I really prefer that one with the bandana over this. This Punisher figure has some really nice painted detail on this harness here. Has really nice paint wash over it. And the skull is really nice and clean and white. I'm not going to take that rifle out of his hands because it's a real pain in the ass to get it in there. But I actually had to cut the trigger fingers on these hands because he just had regular like gripping hands like that. So I had to get an X-Acto and cut in between his fingers there so he would have proper trigger fingers on each hand. I really like this figure a lot, and he's still available. I ran into a bunch of them while I was looking for Netflix and Thor Ragnarok figures here recently at my local Walgreens stores. So he's still available if you haven't picked him up and you decide you want to. Here we have the Invincible Iron Fist Marvel Legends figure by Hasbro, and I'm really happy with the way this guy turned out also. Reuse of the Pizza Spidey mold, but to me I think it works really good, suits the character just fine, and has really good articulation. This Iron Fist figure has two wrapped fists, and you can see where they unplug there, kind of mid-forearm. And he also has two glowing fists. And these are non-articulated, but they have like almost like a black skeleton underneath this transparent yellow plastic that looks really cool. And the figure also comes with these two flame effects that you can plug on to his fist like that. And not really meant to go on this wrapped fist, but you get the drift. Alright, so a few years ago there was a Odin Build-A-Figure wave that came with a Iron Fist figure in an all-white costume, and the main selling point for that figure was that he came with a lot of different alternate hands, right? So I bought that figure for the Odin Build-A-Figure part. I wasn't real crazy about that figure just because I wanted Iron Fist in a green costume because that's what I'm used to seeing him in the comic books. So I sold that figure on eBay with one set of hands. I saved the other set of hands, and these weren't a perfect fit in these cuffs. I had to trim the pegs down a little bit. So these wrapped fist hands are removable from these wrapped cuffs here, and I had to trim down the pegs on the white Iron Fist hands to get them to fit in there. But now I have 6 new alternate hands for my Iron Fist figure. And basically what you do is you just unplug them like so and replace it with the new hands. And the skin tone doesn't match perfectly, but I can repaint his face pretty easily, I think, to match the flesh tone with those alternate hands if I want to. If you pose the hands far enough away from the figure's face, then it's not as apparent. But anyways, so not really what it's intended to do, but I think it's pretty cool. I like that a lot. So now I have 6 more alternate hands for my Iron Fist figure. This is kind of like a come get some hand, and this is kind of like a claw hand. That's pretty cool. And then I've got a couple of karate chop hands. Next up is the Marvel Legends Nuke figure. It was part of the Giant Man, MCU Giant Man Build-A-Figure wave that came out a year or so ago. I bought this figure on clearance for like $7, and I think that was a pretty fair price for him. He came with a rifle that looked really, really silly. It looked like some kind of ray gun or something. It was painted up red, white, and blue, and I didn't like that at all, so I swapped it out for a more realistic rifle that came with a Marvel Select Deadpool figure. He also has this knife, and you can see that the paint has kind of come off the tip of the blade there from putting it in the knife sheath on his back, so that's kind of a bummer. This is not a real essential character as far as I'm concerned. The only story I've read with him was where Captain America and Daredevil team up to fight him. He was in Jessica Jones. He was kind of like a side villain in that series, but he didn't look anything like this. The main reason why I bought this figure was because it came with an alternate head that looks like a Terminator skull with some of the skin ripped off of it around the eye and around the mouth. And I'm going to try and use that eventually for a Metallo custom to go with my Superman villains. This is a pretty decent figure. Like I said, don't pay full price for it, but he's alright. Alright, here's the new Netflix Jessica Jones figure from the Marvel Knights wave. I really like this figure a lot. There's not a whole lot you can do with her, though, besides just have her stand around. Like, she's pretty posable, but I don't know, just she's not a real super dynamic figure. I am really happy to have her, though. I think the likeness to Kristen Ritter is really, really good, and the paint job on her jeans is done pretty well. I wish that she had some alternate hands so that she could actually hold something instead of just have those clenched fists all the time. And it would have been really cool if she'd come with like a scarf and a bottle of Jack or something. That would have been awesome. I really love Jessica Jones. It's probably my favorite of all the Netflix series, followed by Daredevil and Luke Cage. But so I'm really happy to have this figure. I think it looks really good. I did have to go find like 2 or 3 of them before I got one that had really decent paint on the eyes, but really happy with this figure. I would recommend it if you like that Jessica Jones Netflix series. Also from the Marvel Netflix TV series is the John Bernthal Punisher figure here, and I'm really happy with this guy also. I think that I would like to try and paint his eyebrows a little bit darker, because I think they seem a little bit too light, but other than that I think it's a really good likeness to the actor. I swapped out the rifle. The rifle that he came with was a little warped from the packaging and seemed like it was made out of a little softer material than some of the other rifles that I have in my collection, so I gave him this one instead. And he doesn't have a holster, unfortunately, for the pistol that he came with, so that's still too bad, but just give that pistol to some other character that needs a pistol that doesn't have a good looking one. So anyways, this is a pretty kick-ass Punisher figure. I'm not going to go into too much detail like I did with Jessica Jones, because there's a lot of reviews on YouTube right now of these figures. They're available now pretty much everywhere. I saw them at Toys R Us yesterday. I've seen them at Walmart. I picked these up a few weeks ago at Walgreens. They were the first stores that seemed to be getting them, so they're out there. They're available. Punisher's 2 per case. I was going to get the Daredevil figure from this set, but I haven't seen one that had good paint on his face, and I don't know, for some reason I didn't really like him that much, so I'm going to buy the Marvel Select version that comes out later this year instead. Alright, last and maybe least is the Marvel Select Daredevil figure. I bought this figure really cheap at a local comic book shop years ago, and I think he looks really nice. The paint and sculpted detail, I think he looks pretty realistic, but he's just not very dynamic, and you can't really get him in any cool poses. So basically I just put this with some other oddball Marvel things that I have in a case, and he just kind of stands there like he's waiting on a bus. I really like Marvel Select in general. This is just not a really good example of a good Marvel Select figure. Alright, so there you have it. There's my overall review of my Defenders slash Street Level Heroes slash Daredevil slash Punisher action figure collection. As of recording this, I have not gotten a chance to watch Defenders yet, so please don't put any spoiler information in the comments section. I would appreciate it if you didn't do that. I'm really excited about the Defenders series on Netflix. So far, my favorite is Jessica Jones, followed by Daredevil, Season 1 and 2, and Luke Cage. I was only able to just barely make it through the first episode of Iron Fist. I thought it was really terrible, and from what I've heard, doesn't sound like I really missed anything. One of my only gripes with the Marvel Netflix shows is that I think they tend to run a little too long. I think 13 episodes or whatever they do is a little too long. They could trim the fat. And I think that Defenders being cut down to just 8 episodes is a step in the right direction. I think 8 or 10 episodes, like they did with Stranger Things, I think that would be perfect. A little more digestible for me and kind of streamline the storytelling. So I don't think I'll be able to shotgun the entire series over the weekend, but I am going to get started at least. I'm a really big fan of Ghostbusters and Aliens, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Sigourney Weaver kick some ass, hopefully. I hope that they don't put too much Iron Fist in Defenders, and it would be really kick-ass if Punisher makes an appearance, I think. So I hope that you get a chance to watch Defenders over the weekend, and I hope you enjoy it. I also hope that you found this video informative and entertaining. So until next time, I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye. Motherfucker is mowing his yard again. He mows his yard like twice a week.